thank God. Okay, it's showing. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our ODE OSCA meetup. We are excited to have everyone here today. I know it's a beautiful day here in Toledo, Ohio. So you may be joining us at a later time, which is fine. I did want to, so today we're going to talk about career-focused competency alternatives for graduation. That is very important. And we have a bunch of people here that are going to share their knowledge about this. And we have a representative from Maumee High School and Pickerington High School to share their programs and to talk about the steps that they went to create these wonderful programs that they have. So it is so nice to have an example. So I appreciate everyone being here today. I am Sarah Hoffman. I'm the president of the Ohio School Counseling Association. And I have Willa Marie Jackson with me today. Also, she is the president-elect.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So glad that you are here.
And we also have Michelle Grimm, and she is the past president. So it's kind of nice. We have a nice support system. We have a elect president and then past president. We all help each other. So Michelle, say hello.
Welcome. Good to see everybody.
All right, so I'm going to pass this over to Graham Wood, who's from the Ohio Department of Education, and then we're going to have a whole bunch of people talk to you about career competency alternatives. So thank you, Graham, and take it over.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, Sarah. I am so excited to be here today, and so excited, even more excited than I am to be here today, excited to have all of these incredible minds here with us today to be able to share their knowledge about their specific areas. So we brought a bunch of folks from the Ohio Department of Education to speak to their specific areas of knowledge. So they'll be here to share quickly and then also around to hopefully answer some questions. And then we have some specific folks from the education community here to speak to some of these career-focused competency alternatives and to speak to their experience setting up programs and what that's been like, what's gone well, what are some roadblocks, and how can we overcome them. And just to give us some context, we're specifically wanting to talk about this competency alternatives because, the current sophomores, a month or two away from becoming juniors are going to have to meet these long-term graduation requirements. And if they're not meeting the competency score of 684 on Algebra 1 or Integrated Math 1 and English Language Arts 2, they are going to have to demonstrate competency in some alternative way. And whether that's College Credit Plus, like we talked about last month, or military enlistment, like we talked about, where we're going to talk about next month, or this career-focused set of competency alternatives, they have to do one of these three things. And we're hearing from a lot of folks that there's a huge focus on these career-focused competency alternatives. And there's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns about, what does it actually look like? And especially for students that may not have immediate access to career technical education in their building, or, folks that have never had a ton of experience with career tech, what do these look like? So we're here today to hopefully give you some familiar faces and names to be able to reach out to at the department, and also to give some examples of how to access these. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to pass it to my esteemed colleague, Ryan Curtis. Ryan, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about web exams?
Thanks, Graham, and good afternoon. I am Ryan Curtis, Program Specialist in the Office of Career Technical Education, and I'm here today to just share with you briefly around the foundational component, or one of our three foundational options for demonstrating competency in this career focus. And so one of our foundationals is earning a score of proficient or higher on 3 or more web exams in a single career pathway. Now, there's a lot of technical jargon in here that is coming from the Office of Career Technical Education. So I want to kind of help bring some of this and simplify it for you. So this is an alternative for competency with students who are participating in career technical education courses and who will set for the statewide end of course exam that we refer to as web exam, who is our vendor for those. And this is all within an approved CTE 26 career pathway. And so each of our different career fields has their pathways. And so this would be a student who has taken at least 3 courses and has participated and earned a proficient score or better on the end of course assessment. So one of the big terms that we use in career technical education is a concentrator. And so students begin their program of concentration once they've completed 2 courses. And we use a definition for completion in career technical education as a student who has sat for 90% of the seat time for the course, or a student who has earned full or partial credit for the course. So any student who meets those completion definitions would be able to set for the end of course assessment and potentially use that proficient score combined with 2 other courses to meet this and demonstrate this foundational competency. So again, this one here is very specific to career tech students. And in order to set for those assessments, you do have to have been completed a CTE approved course, and those courses have to be congruent within an approved pathway.
Ryan, you did a spectacular job of explaining that very quickly. There's a lot of details there, and you did an awesome job. One thing I want to note is, currently, the word on that is a proficient score on 3 or more web exams. There's a little bit of confusion there around, how web exams are practiced in career tech versus what was actually in the legislation. There's one word missing there of cumulative. And that is something that we've asked for a little bit of clarification on from the legislature, and we're waiting on that. But currently, a student would have to score proficient on those individual web exams. We're hoping, because in career technical education, we don't really look at those individual scores. We look at the cumulative pathway score for a student for those tests combined within one pathway. We're hoping that we'll be able to apply that in the same way toward graduation, but we're waiting for that clarification. So thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. And Ryan will hopefully be here for some questions if you have them in a little bit. For our second foundational option, I'm going to kick it over to Emma Waymeyer. Emma?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Emma Waymeyer. I'm a program administrator with industry recognized credentials. I'm just here to give a brief overview of industry recognized credential programs. A credential is the verification of an individual's qualification or competence. Credentials are issued by a third-party vendor, so the Ohio Department of Education does not actually issue credentials. We just work to create and maintain the approved list of credentials that are available to students. Schools receive credit in the Prepared for Success measure on the state report card when reporting students who earn 12 points of industry recognized credentials from the department's list. Schools contribute to Ohio's shared goal by setting their students up for a transition beyond high school and into the workforce. Industry recognized credentials are an innovative approach to truly recognize and account for a student's hard work in becoming career ready and prepared for their best possible future. Industry partner connections provide insight to valued credentials, and by using industry recognized credentials, employers can validate the knowledge and skills of potential employees and save valuable time in assessing the competency of their job applicants. Ohio offers several ways to qualify for a high school diploma, and many of the options include, at least in part, earning 12 points of industry recognized credentials from the department's approved list as part of graduation requirements. Credentials are broken out into 13 career fields, and all 12 points must be from the same career field. Students must take and pass a skill attainment assessment to earn the credential. And another key component to credential programs are that schools may also bring in outside partners to prepare students for industry-recognized credential exams or use current staff to assist in the industry-recognized credential earning process. Schools should consider all staff who may be helpful, including individuals who have earned their own credentials and understand the process of earning specific industry-recognized credentials. Credentials will be reported through EMIS, and once reported, schools will be reimbursed for the fee assessment amount. Our role is to support you as you support your students through your credential programs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. And we do have, industry credentials are one of the places where folks are, most excited to hear more and to learn more about how to implement those programs. And two of our examples that we're going to bring to you this afternoon are going to speak specifically to how to set up industry credential programs. So stay tuned if you're interested in hearing more. So now for our third and last foundational competency alternative, I'm going to kick it over to Brenna Bartlett.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brenna Bartlett, and I am an assistant director in the Office of Career Technical Education at the Ohio Department of Education. Talking today about the foundational competency demonstration of completing a pre-apprenticeship or enrolling or completing an apprenticeship program. Pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship are both actually types of work-based learning, which you'll hear a little bit more about that umbrella term later on. What makes pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship distinct is the recognition procedure that both programs go through in partnership with Apprentice Ohio, which is our Ohio State Apprenticeship Council. Like many other forms of work-based learning, pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship are defined by both a classroom or instructional component based on technical skill and professional skill and on-the-job readiness preparation, as well as an intensive opportunity to experience on-the-job training aligned to a particular industry. And as we talk about pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship, we have what are called apprenticeable occupations or occupational sectors. A lot of times we might think of that as being limiting, and there are defined apprenticeable occupations and occupational sectors, but it's actually a lot more broad than you might anticipate. There are registered apprenticeships across Ohio in a number of different career fields, almost all the career fields, in fact. Although we do have a significant number that are aligned to maybe some of those more traditional industries that you might consider, including manufacturing, healthcare, information technology, construction, and those alike. When you can begin to look at starting a pre-apprenticeship, and I'm just going to give a high-level overview, you're going to partner again with an apprenticeship service provider through Apprentice Ohio or the Ohio State Apprenticeship Council. They are going to walk you through the development of identifying those apprenticeable occupations or occupational sectors that you might have an interest in allowing students to have this highly technical skilled experience in. You're going to develop an operating plan, which is going to include the development of the instructional standards that you will include as a part of the experience. If you are offering students a chance to participate in career technical education coursework, then much of that identification of industry standards is done for you. However, even if you are not operating a career technical education program, there is an opportunity to participate and set up a pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship program. Many professional associations and technical unions have professional standards that they use in the curriculum and teaching that they are happy to lend to you in the development of this type of experience. You will identify as part of the process certain business partners, and you must have an aligned registered apprenticeship to create a continuum for students should they choose to continue pursuing apprenticeship beyond the pre-apprenticeship program. Because again of the highly skilled nature of a pre-apprenticeship study and apprenticeship work, completion of a pre-apprenticeship is considered the certificate of a completion for a pre-apprenticeship program, I should say, is considered an industry recognized credential, and it represents 12 points in any career field pathway. And I think that is most of the high level information.
And there's a lot more information there, but thank you, Brenna, for giving us that high level information on pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship. And she mentioned work-based learning, where we're going to go in a minute, but I also want to highlight that Brenna did mention, any student completing a registered pre-apprenticeship program also inherently earns 12 points of industry credentials. So there's a lot of value there to students that are completing that pre-apprenticeship program to both, complete that and another foundational demonstration. And I realized as people are going through this that I never explained the structure of this. So I'm going to go ahead and step back for a moment and tell you what foundational means and supporting means that we're about to hear about in a moment and how they play into each other. In these career-focused competency alternatives, students need to do 2 of the things that we talk about today. We've now talked about 3 things: the web exams, industry credentials, and pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship. They can pair one of those foundational options either with another supporting option, one of the things that we're going to talk about here in a minute, or with another foundational option. They need to do 2 things, and at least one of those things has to be one of these foundational options that we've just heard about. So students have to do at least one of those things, and then they have the option for the second demonstration to be any of the things that we talk about today. So with that said, sorry for going backward, I'm going to kick it to Cassie Palsgrove, who's going to tell you a little bit more about work-based learning.
And I'm glad you set that context, because one thing that's really important to think about is how these work together. So Graham, you mentioned it, a pre-apprenticeship or an apprenticeship, once a student's completed that, can qualify for a 12-point industry recognized credential, but depending on the program, it can also qualify for 250 hours of work-based learning as well. So we're going to talk just a little bit about work-based learning and how we define that. So I'm going to share my screen with an overview document, and I believe you're going to have access to this in the chat as well if you're looking for kind of a high-level overview of work-based learning. So there's really kind of 3 guiding principles that we're really looking for in a high-quality work-based learning experience. And the first guiding principle is that a work-based learning experience must occur at some type of a work site. Now, that work site could be virtually, and it could happen at a school site. But this idea of a student going to work, attending work, is a key guiding principle. The second guiding principle is around co-supervision. So making sure that a student has an educational instructor, and an employer or business mentor to have access to throughout the 250-hour experience, whether that 250 hours is occurring over multiple experiences or in one experience. It's really important that the student have an educator, mentor to fall back on, as well as an employer or business mentor to really guide this learning experience. The last is that there be some type of a learning agreement that builds in the professional skills, the technical skills, the academic learning that's going to happen as a part of this work-based learning experience. That learning agreement is really meant to coalesce all the partners around that individual student's experience for work-based learning. So those are really the 3 guiding principles to determine whether or not an experience is truly a work-based learning experience. So beyond those 3 guiding principles, there's really 6 different types of work-based learning that a student can engage in as long as those 3 things are met. So many of our work-based learning experiences happen in an off-site placement or an internship. So we hear a lot of success stories around student interns being employed, over the summer and even throughout the school year. And so as long as that learning agreement is in place, there's an employer partner and an educator partner at the table to co-supervise, and that there is an actual job site that the student's reporting to, that can count as a work-based learning. Brenna's mentioned pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship opportunities. There's also opportunities for virtual or remote work placement. Entrepreneurship is something that we'd really like to promote, and thinking about how students can build their own small businesses. Having access to a small business mentor is really important in this experience for that case. Also, school-based enterprise. Many of our school districts across the state of Ohio have really great in-house businesses that students can learn through a work-based learning experience from. And then lastly, the last type is around simulated work environments. So often when a student is at school, there's a way that we can simulate the work experience with those 3 guiding principles that allow for work-based learning to occur in a variety of ways. So when we get into the technicalities of what kind of counts for a supporting option towards graduation, the idea is that a student participates in 250 hours of cumulative work-based learning experience, starting in their 9th grade year. So we really want to see students have a robust, sustained interaction with employers and have an opportunity to build their employment skills through these work-based learning experiences. So there is a small difference between the way that counts for career technical education students and for Ohio high school graduation requirements. And so if we scroll to the top of this document, you'll kind of see this caveat here that those 250 hours really should be in a student's career pathway or tied to their high school graduation or student success plan. And so if your school district is thinking about how you might lift up work-based learning opportunities for your students, don't hesitate to reach out to the Department of Education, and we'll walk you through some of those nuanced differences as they may come about. So hopefully that provides kind of a general overview of work-based learning and how it intersects with apprenticeships, and then makes that connection between foundational and supporting options for graduation.
That was awesome, Cassie. Thank you so much. I don't need to kick it to anybody else because I'm going to share with you the next supporting option, which is the Workkeys Assessment. Students can also demonstrate a supporting option for competency by earning the Workforce Readiness Score on the Workkeys Assessment. And this assessment is one that is also, like a lot of our industry credential assessments, not directly managed by the Ohio Department of Education. Our familiar friends at the ACT, our college readiness assessment, also administer what is called the ACT Workkeys test. And where the ACT itself is often used to manage or to measure college readiness, the Workkeys measures work readiness. And it is, the product of a lot of years of research working with people that hire folks, and thinking through what shows that a student is ready or an adult is ready to enter the workforce at this specific area. And that Workkeys test gives an idea of what level they're ready to enter. So just like the ACT, it's made up of 3 subtests: applied mathematics, workplace documents, and graphic literacy. Each of those tests will give a student a subscore. That subscore can be less than 3, all the way up to 7 points on that test. And those tests currently are cumulatively added together. And the current score that a student needs to meet on that Workkeys test is a 14. So a student scoring a 14 over those 3 tests, and they can add those 3 tests together. Student scoring a 14 would meet this requirement. Now we're currently reviewing that score, so that may change coming in the next few months. But that currently is the score for the Workkeys, is a 14. If you're interested in keeping an eye out on that score, I'm sure we will be communicating about it widely when that is determined. But students currently, have the option to score a 14 on that Workkeys. You may notice that, there's a very similar pairing here that goes with one of our current options for graduation generally, of a student earning 12 points of industry credentials and scoring a 14 on the Workkeys. That option will continue to be available to students as a career-focused competency alternative, because notice that pairing a foundational option, that 12 points of industry credentials, with a supporting option, a 14 or higher on the Workkeys test. So that option continues, just specifically toward competency. It won't complete their SEAL requirement entirely as well. So we have one more person here to speak to another supporting option, and that is Kayla Mack from the Ohio Department of Education. Kayla?
Thank you. And yes, my name is Kayla Mack. I'm an education program specialist in the Office of Career Connections at the Department of Education. And I am going to share my screen here and talk to you about the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal. So if I can get a thumbs up when you guys can see that, I'll go ahead and get started. Wonderful. So the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal, the intent was to address the soft skills gap in recognizing Ohio's work-ready students, and is a part of the options that students can pursue in their graduation pathway. And so students can work with 3 or more mentors, demonstrating proficiency across these 15 professional skills. And across these skills, students can chunk this out. So with one mentor, they can do reliability, work ethic, punctuality. With another mentor, they could do X, Y, and Z, and so on. So it's not all 15 with every single mentor, and they can have more than 3. And in regards to their mentors, mentors can come from 3 environments. That's community, work, and school. And at least 2 of these environments need to be represented for those students who are pursuing the Readiness Seal. So that, giving an example, A student could have perhaps a teacher in the school and maybe a sports coach. And then they could have, maybe they're doing a part-time job. So they could have their supervisor and their part-time job being their third mentor. And they would use those specific experiences that those mentors would then work with them throughout the professional skills in helping them support getting to that proficient level through that mentorship. And this is just a glimpse of what the required standardized form looks like for students. And I wanted to share this just so that I can give some pieces of advice, given that the structure of this form. As those who may be on the call, there is a place specifically for the school designated administrator for the Readiness Seal, where you would then validate that the student has completed all of the requirements. And that you have, if in your discretion, have spoke to some of the mentors that those students have engaged with to get that additional validation that everything that is stated is truthful. And in addition to that, as students are going through the Readiness Seal process, I think one of the most quality components of this is this area where students will give their demonstration of each of these skills. So they're giving their evidence of what they've done to demonstrate proficiency. And granted, this is a small box. So I always advise that to give students breadth and depth in this space, because this is where they internalize their experiences, is just having them note in there, see additional documentation, and allowing them to use a Word document that they can attach to their seal form, just so that they're able to really explain and give depth to that experience and have a quality conversation with their mentors. And still using this definitely as a validation form where the mentors will still check off that, yes, they have reviewed this with the student and they're signing off saying that, yes, they've demonstrated proficiency, but giving them space to go beyond and really think deeply about their experiences. I just try to give that buffer in there just to help support as you're working with kids. One, it's a small box. And you don't want to confine them to that. And also, student handwriting, like all of ours, isn't always the best if they're handwriting it. So I certainly wanted to give that information. And then we also have this rubric. And the rubric was designed to help walk students through the process, understanding that this might be their first time being asked to demonstrate any of these skills, and it is okay to be a beginner, and what does that mean, and creating a quality structure to get students from those beginning stages to what would be considered proficient. And this isn't the end all be all, this is just kind of a guided document to help facilitate conversation so that everyone at the table has an understanding of what the expectation is through these examples. And that's from the student, the parent, the mentors, and the educators as they are going through this process and understanding what the full expectation is. And then for our administrators in this session, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what does it mean to finalize a student's documentation once they have completed the process. So through your student information systems, they should be able to, there should be an identifier within those systems to identify students who have received the seal. So that's one end of it. And then on the other end is our EMIS coding. So for the Ohio Meetups Readiness Seal, you will be reported through the student program record. And for the students who have earned it, there's a specific code for the Readiness Seal, program code for the Readiness Seal. So those, at this point in the life of the Ohio Meetups Readiness Seal, these things should be kind of a good workflow, but I wanted to put that in there just in case some of our listeners are new to the process and getting students engaged in the Readiness Seal, just kind of what those back-end expectations are for reporting. Now, nothing comes back to the Department of Education in terms of the actual records of a student. So as they complete the Readiness Seal process, that stays in their personal record. Nothing is submitted to the Department of Education. We, of course, will get just the raw data on the count of students who have received the Readiness Seal through EMIS. And for our diploma, so as we know that our students get a designation, a seal on their transcript through the student information systems, and then they also get their seal designation on their diplomas. So we have currently worked with the distributors across Ohio on ensuring that they had the specs for the image for the Readiness Seal. Now, this is a partnership that happens locally. This isn't vetted through the Ohio Department of Education. These are partnerships with our local districts with their diploma distributors to determine how they are going to handle how those seals are all getting put on diplomas. However, if there are those schools and districts listening today who do self-reporting, like self-printing of diplomas, you can certainly contact me directly and we'll get you through that process. And I've added my email address to the agenda, the live agenda, so that you have that directly as well. And then in addition, students can also showcase that they've received the seal designation through Ohio Means Jobs. They can do that on their Ohio Means Jobs K-12 profiles, where the educators can use reporting tools to give students that designation. And again, I've added links on what that means using Ohio Means Jobs K-12 to give that designation. Now that's not, this is more of like an add-on for kids. It's not part of the requirements, but it's a wonderful add-on for kids because it gives them additional visualization to the workforce that they have those professional skills needed and desired in the workforce. And I believe that is all I have on that. So hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you so much, Kayla. I really appreciate that. And so we have spent obviously quite some time now talking, and you know, our folks from the department are great at talking in theory about what these things look like, but we know that you need to hear what it actually looks like in action. So we brought some folks here today who have implemented some of these options. So I am going to send it over to our first example, and we have Christine Galvin here from the ESC of Central Ohio, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what it looks like to implement pre-apprenticeship programs. Christine, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Graham, for inviting me. So I just want to start. Hopefully you picked up from all the presenters from ODE that pre-apprenticeships are an awesome way to go to help your students meet these graduation requirements, right? Because first of all, pre-apprenticeship meets the competency, but it also meets the industry credential piece, which could also be a seal. It could be the work-based learning piece. And if you design it correctly, you can also put the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal as part of it. So it can really hit all of those different parts. And I just want to say, you know, don't be afraid of pre-apprenticeships. I know sometimes, you know, when you might have been listening to Brenna, you might have been thinking, I don't know what half of those words mean. But you really can kind of go through and figure out the process. So in the resources section of the agenda, we've developed here at the ESC just an online module that kind of walks you through that operating plan development that she was talking about. And it kind of just takes you through the different pieces and components of how to do it. It's free and it's open to everyone. So if anyone's interested in joining that, the registration link is on there for you. And also in the agenda, my contact information is in there and I'd be happy to answer any questions. So just to give you kind of an example of how we approach pre-apprenticeship programs, as Graham shared, I work at the ESC of Central Ohio, and we were talking with a lot of our member districts who are interested in developing pre-apprenticeship plans. And we decided instead of every district having to recreate this plan and recreate a program, we decided at the ESC that we would be the sponsor and the holder of the pre-apprenticeship plan. And then any of our member districts could participate in those. And we would actually help our districts develop the plans. We would help them monitor it. That way we're being collaborative and it wouldn't be everyone having to go through the process for approval. So that's our model, but that's only one model. There are lots of other models that you can talk through with Apprenticeship Ohio. So we've actually developed pre-apprenticeship programs in construction, IT, culinary, welding, facilities maintenance, and we're working on childcare right now. So, you know, what you really need to start with is when you're looking at your school is what pieces do you already have in place? So for example, with culinary, when we talked with a lot of our districts, they already have a lot of that coursework in place, whether that's through a family and consumer sciences classes, you know, some of your foods classes, you might have a lot of those culinary competencies already in place. which meets those instructional components of the pre-apprenticeship plan. And another question that I always get is, Christine, we don't have 250 hours of work-based learning experience. That's not a requirement of the pre-apprenticeship plan in a program. There's actually no time hour requirement for a pre-apprenticeship plan, which a lot of people don't realize. It's all competency based. So it's all about identifying, as Brenna shared, what are those competencies that each occupational area needs to be able to demonstrate to show that, yes, I successfully completed the skills necessary for this pre-apprenticeship. So when you're writing your plan, you're going to identify that coursework, which a lot of schools have already as pieces and components of, and then you're going to partner with a work-based, with an employer for that work-based learning piece. In our case, City Barbecue really was interested in developing a partnership with us. City Barbecue has locations all across Central Ohio. So our districts were basically able to replicate these pre-apprenticeship programs with the coursework in their school and then partnering with their particular city barbecue location. So that's kind of a example of a large employer. But then we also had Hamilton Local, which is a school district over by Scioto Downs, if you've ever went to the race course. And they already had some welding pieces. They had a virtual welder. They were already teaching a lot of those competencies. And they had a small local employer that was really interested in having that pipeline of Hamilton local students entering into their company because they just really couldn't find welders. So that pre-apprenticeship program we developed with a small local employer. Another example is maybe you don't have the coursework in your particular school. Worthington Industries, they actually decided to provide their staff to come into the schools to be able to teach the coursework in the schools and provide the work-based learning experience. And with Worthington Industries, again, they were thinking pipeline. So we were able to have 3 different schools participate in that program. The training was all held at Worthington schools, but all of the different schools, Hilliard, Worthington, and Southwestern, sent students to that program so that we could scale it and we can have more students participate. So the biggest thing to remember is just thinking about, what do you have? Who might be some of your local business and industry partners that might be interested in partnering with you? And then the third piece is that registered apprenticeship alignment. And that's the part that gets tricky for a lot of people. And if you go on to Apprenticeship Ohio's website, you can see a list of all the approved registered apprenticeship programs. And basically when they say align, that means that registered apprenticeship program is going to give input. So they're going to look at your pre-apprenticeship operating and plan and say, yes, these are the competencies that we think need to be taught. This aligns with our plan. And then they're also going to provide that information to your students in that program about how they could enter into that apprenticeship program if they wanted to continue on. That doesn't mean they have to. It just means that registered apprenticeship program would offer that information to them about, hey, if you really like this, you completed your pre-apprenticeship, here's how you apply to our registered apprenticeship program, and here's your next steps. So when it says align, what you would have to do then is just get a letter from a registered apprenticeship program saying, yes, we're aware of this pre-apprenticeship program, we're giving input into the curriculum, we're going to share information about how students can continue on, and you include that in your operating plan. So it's really not as intimidating. When I first started this process and I started to read Ohio Revised Code, and I'm like, I don't even know what this means. But just by asking questions and kind of going through the process, you can really see that it's not quite as complicated once you actually get into it. And then as far as registered apprenticeship programs, a lot of people are familiar with the trade union registered apprenticeship programs, but there are lots of other options. Like, for example, in our area, Columbus State has a lot of registered apprenticeship programs. So you could align with a community college. Sinclair also has several. So there are a lot of different options that you can look through and align with. And then the final step is to submit that to the Ohio Apprenticeship Council, which is run by Ohio Means Jobs in Ohio. They're kind of the entity that oversees that piece. And they will look through your plan and they'll give you feedback, and then they give the final approval, which then makes it registered. That's the big thing. It has to be approved by the Ohio Apprenticeship Council in order for it to be counted as a registered pre-apprenticeship plan. So hopefully that gives you an example of how we've approached it. A school can be a sponsor without an ESC. So you could actually write your own plan if you wanted to do that. You could also reach out to your local ESC to see if they are willing. And then sometimes registered apprenticeship plans will work with you just to build a pre-apprenticeship plan that goes into their apprenticeship program. So there are lots of different ways you can approach it. Ours is just one model, but it gives you an example to think about.
Thank you so much, Christine. And yeah, I appreciate you you coming and sharing that, and especially around that idea. And Brenna mentioned it as well around, pre-apprenticeship doesn't just mean those occupations that you think of when you hear the word apprentice. It means so much more, and there's so much more of the industry that's getting interested in pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship because there's a lot of value there in creating that talent pipeline that so many of our workforce partners are looking for. So thank you, Christine. Really appreciate you being here. Now we're going to shift our attention to industry recognized credentials, and we have Colby Schmidt here, who is at Pickerington Local. And Colby, I would love to hear from you about your credential programs that you've implemented.
Yeah, so I'm Colby Schmidt. I'm a school counselor at Pickerington High School North. And just as a caveat, some of what I'm going to talk about is things that we implemented this year at Pickerington, and then some of it is some of the stuff we had in the works when I was at my previous district, which was Zanesville City Schools. So a little bit different clientele, a little bit different demographic that we were serving. So I'll kind of talk to both of those. The main program that I have found success with in both locations is the Rise Up program. And in the agenda, I linked information to the Rise Up program. It is super easy to set up, which is probably its biggest plus because we're all really busy and we need things that are easy sometimes, but it takes like a day. You fill out a form. I've linked that there. Once you get an account, you can go on and order your materials, and they have both paper pencil materials and then also online materials. So in this crazy year of remote learning, online option was really nice because then our students could do it whether we were in person or not. And so it's about $100 for the first course. So it's 2 courses. Each of them are worth 6 points. So the first one is Retail Industry Fundamentals. And that course is really pretty, I would say, quick for students to get through. I think most of our students were able to complete it in a month or less. And the exam for that is not proctored. Students can take it at their leisure as they're working through the course. And if they don't pass it the first time, they do have one free retake with the purchase of the license for the test. So once they pass that first one, then we had them move on to the second course. And that one is a little bit more difficult. We have continued to have success with it for students that are both on an IEP service through EL services and gen ed students. And we've had students earn that second 6-point credential through the customer service and sales course. But that test is a proctored test, it's a timed test, and it's a cumulative test. So it's a little bit different than that first one where they can kind of work through it on their own. So what we found is, especially for our students that maybe were EL or service with an IEP, it's a lot of scenarios and things like that. So having someone read through it with them as they're going through the course, making sure they're understanding, we found that to be helpful. And you can request accommodations through the Penn Foster if you have a student that needs that. when they go to actually take the test. But we found that it needed a little bit more scaffolding for the second course, but we continued to have success with it. And those two together combined for the 12-point credential, which we have paired at Pickerington with the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal for students this year. I did link in the agenda some information about a CLT certification. CLT is Certified Logistics Technician. That is something we did a little bit in Zanesville. And even though it made sense in our community, because we really tried intentionally choosing our credentials so that they fit the employment needs in our community, there were warehouses, there was industry like that our students were entering the workforce and going into. But we found that that course itself was not super intuitive. And if students didn't have kind of a background knowledge, some of it, like the terminology and things like that, really didn't resonate with them. And as a result, we didn't have as much success with it. We did have a few students who earned the initial 6-point credential because it's like a building block. You have to take the certified logistics. I don't know if it's like assistant, apprentice. I don't know what the A stands for. You have to take that one before you can take the CLT, which is the second 6-point. And I think we had like a couple out of like 10 kids who passed that first test. So we just didn't find that one to be as relative for our student body, but it was still on the like implementation fairly easy in terms of you didn't have to buy any equipment. You didn't have to have any special licensing to teach the course. The proctor or the instructor for the course could be anyone as long as they themselves went through the course prior to the students. And that's really what we were looking for in both of my schools, was a program that we can implement fairly easily without a lot of expense or overhead costs of equipment and things like that. And both of those programs kind of fell into that category.
Thank you, Colby. And a couple of things that you mentioned, I think were really important there is, you know, one, credentials can be one of the options that you can implement a little quicker. You know, you know, you can set up programs that can move fairly quickly, which is really helpful. And two, I really appreciated that you mentioned the ability to seek out accommodations for credential exams, because a lot of folks are, you know, unaware of that and don't know, and just assume now because it's not, you know, a school offered test, we can't offer accommodations there. But, you know, these companies are, you know, subject to the requirements there, just like any other testing vendor. So they're required to give those accommodations if requested. So that was a really, really helpful thing for you to point out. Thank you. And we have one more example to share from a school, and I'm going to kick it over to Justin Foltz and Matthew Dick from Maumee to share with us a little bit about their programs.
Well, you're probably going to hear a lot of the same things that from us that you just heard from Colby, but it's okay. I mean, we're taking a slightly different approach, but I'll preface it by saying we have a very, very good vocational partner. It's Penna Career Center here in the northwest corner of the state, and we did not try to replicate their different pathways. They have so many career tech programs, but we do have students who elect not to go there, that stay in our school, that can't graduate under the traditional pathways. Well, what you would call traditional, I guess, which should be Algebra 1 and ELA 2. And so we found the need to offer a supplement to our students on a limited basis at our high school. And Justin and I, we went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting. We're talking to some of the employers in our area, and with that, we narrowed it down. And Justin's pulled up on the screen, and he'll join in here in a second. But our employers in our area helped us narrow down to the business, marketing, and finance, and the hospitality and tourism. And so we are implementing those pathways, and I'll just be upfront. These are starting next year for us. COVID sort of interrupted our initial rollout, like it did with a lot of things with everybody. But we're full on it next year. And we wanted to start with a fundamental course that was across many of the different CT pathways. And so we got some teachers credentialed in Yellow Belt, Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt, which is it's a 3-point CT. And then the Green Belt, which is the next step up, is a 6-point. Black Belt is 12-point. But we started with Yellow Belt. And if you look at all the 13 different pathways, it appears in every single one of them. Challenge, finding a vendor. And I know we have ODE people on here, so I'll be very, I'll be kind with what I say, but ODE was not a lot of help. When I called repeatedly, they could not recommend vendors. I get that. They didn't even have a clearinghouse or a list. So we went to a large local employer, which is Owens, Illinois, and they helped us find a vendor. And then our teachers just were trained this year, and we're going to be rolling out Yellow Belt to our students starting next year. So Justin, you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. One of the things that, I would like to reemphasize that Matt had said was finding some sort of credentials that were a good complement to our career technical partner at Penna Career Center, who does a fantastic job working with a large percentage of our students. So we wanted to find something that was also pretty tangible, meaning it had some, credibility with some of our area employers. So when we took a look at some of our resources that were already available within our building through our Family Consumer Science program, and also we have a satellite business education or marketing education program that operates out of our building. We were also able to use that individual to help provide instruction in some of these courses. So we've outlined 2 possible pathways, one within the business marketing and finance with that emphasis on offering first fundamentals of process improvement with the Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt, and then cascading that on into business foundations, using that Rise Up curriculum and program that was mentioned by Colby earlier, using their customer service and sales credential, as well as the retail industry fundamentals credential as well. We already have several courses that offer first aid and CPR, so we felt that was also a way to get additional point towards their credential. So, with each of these, again, it was about finding a way to complement what our career technical partners do and work together in that. And also for some of our students who maybe don't have the academic credentials in order to get accepted into their first choice program, we felt like we could offer something of great value that actually does have some credibility and help maybe find a student placement for their first opportunity for employment beyond high school.
And if you notice the hospitality and tourism one, we took advantage. We do have a foods lab. It's a CT, Family and Consumer Sciences. All the courses are, and putting ServSafe into that. We do have a number of hotels in our area. And again, this was a good demand from employers. I guess, being the principal at the high school, this started out as me wanting to provide one more safety net. It was a safety net for students that didn't go to our CT center and were staying in our building, but weren't necessarily, again, successful with the more traditional pathway to graduation. But now it's gone from that to expanding it outward to students who might want to take a year before they go to college and make some money. And, to be able to have these credentials behind them when they go out and find jobs in what you might call a gap year. But I don't know, sometimes gap year has a negative connotation to it. It's more a year to kind of prepare yourself for college. We are looking at expanding into a couple more pathways. We are looking also we have a hospital in our district, and they are interested in a pre-apprenticeship program with us. So we're looking down that path also. I don't want to get into so many things, though, that it waters it down and it's not viable because there's just not enough students to spread around. So as a as a high school, we graduate about 190 a year. That's about the size, to give you the size of our building. Looking at a couple of maybe 3 to 4 career tech 12-point pathways and possibly 1 or 2 pre-apprenticeship programs.
Thank you both so much for sharing those opportunities and sharing about, you know, your philosophy in setting them up. And, you know, that idea that you just mentioned there, Matt, about, you know, making sure that you're not expanding too much, you know, so that there's, you know, not students to fill these programs, because that's something that's also important, that a balance that needs to be made between, okay, what are the interests of our students, but, you know, what do we have the room for, and what do we have the capacity to lift up and maintain? Because you can lift up 10 programs, but, you know, in 5 years, those 10 may end up at 3, and you've got, you know, options that were there and are no longer existing. So we are right at 5 o'clock, and we have not had a chance to go through any questions at this point. So one, I just want to stop and say thank you to every single person that presented. This was an incredible wealth of information. I'm really excited to be able to share this link with people when they are interested in the career-focused competency alternatives, and say, hey, here's an overview. You know, it'll give you a little bit about each of them, and you know, some resources to be able to dig into details. I am curious if we do have any. I shouldn't say I'm curious. I am sure that we have questions both in the YouTube chat and in the agenda. So I'm excited. If anybody is able to stick around from, you know, our partners and answer questions, we would love to have you here. If you are not, and you have stuff at 5 o'clock, thank you so much. You have given us already a ton of your time, and we appreciate it. If there are questions that we don't get to, we will move those over to the agenda and make sure that they're there, and we will do our best to get answers to them. If not, you know, within the next couple of days, then, you know, over time here, and we'll just have you keep an eye on that. So Sarah, I saw you had your hand up. I'm sure that you have a question that you're excited to ask.
Yes, so I had a question for Matt and Justin. So with your program, because Maumee High School is not a comprehensive high school, so you're not a career tech entity.
Right.
And so did you have to like get permission from Penta to offer your program?
No, we didn't. And, you know, not all of our students, we send a decent amount of students to Penta, but we have students that either can't get into Penta, like what Justin said, they can't get into the program they want there, or they don't want to go to Penta. We try, you know, and so, no, this was about offering yet another option for the ones that stayed at Maumee. We did not choose it based on Penta has one of these pathways, but we based our choices on what the employment outlook is like in our community.
All right, that makes sense. You know, looking at those you know, the jobs that are available. I am a Maumee grad, so this is very exciting to have you guys here. But that was the only question that I had on the, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Someone just typed something in. It's like hot off the presses. Oh, they're still typing. So I'm going to turn it over to Willa Marie. How's the chat going? Willa Marie watches the chat.
Yes. So today, kudos to our presenters. I didn't have too many questions in the chat today, first time ever. So each one of you handled that so amazingly, if that's the correct grammar. And Sarah, real quick, if for the replay audience, if they do have some questions, would they be able to enter that into the agenda after we're no longer live?
Well, I would say not in the chat, but the agenda, it's like a living document. And we should have mentioned this at the very beginning. I'm sorry, I was fumbling around with the technology. So if you have not looked at the agenda, I would definitely take a look there. And we always say the agenda, so people are like, man, I don't care. But there's on page 3 of the agenda, there is a ton of resources that all of our presenters put in. So like Maumee High School, what they were sharing, that's in there. So that breakdown of their explanation of the program. Plus they also shared their curriculum guide and what it looks like in their curriculum guide. So, you know, so it's a great agenda. Plus if your LPDC takes, you know, if they accept like a certificate of attendance, you can also, there is a link to this certificate of attendance. We do keep an eye on this document for a while after, but at some point I'm going to switch it over to view only, and then people can hop in and still view the resources, but then we don't have to keep checking it. So, so for a while, yes. So if you're watching this, because it's 82 and sunny here in Toledo. So if you're watching this, let's say Thursday, it'll still be open. And if there are questions, I can send them on to Graham and he could take a look.
Yeah, and I will play traffic cop with those questions. Oh, Willa Marie, were you about to mention the question in the chat?
Yes.
Go for it.
All right. So we do have a question. Are school counselors responsible for managing all of these pathways? I know Kentucky has a career and college readiness coaches, which seems like the type of position who would handle this type of thing. Are there plans to incorporate these coaches in Ohio to have a dedicated embedded person to grow these types of opportunities? Great question.
Yeah, oh, Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I think in terms of how we are tracking, especially the data involved in just helping students identify the points they've earned and things like that, I think tools for school counselors are really important in order to manage all that data and understanding the team involved and making sure all that data is getting placed into the correct location so it's easily accessible. You know, as a school counselor, my time is really valuable, and I try to advocate for, you know, our interests as much as possible and making sure that we have the tools and team available in order to manage the information necessary. I personally feel that one of my main responsibilities at the high school level is to be sure that I'm helping students identify a pathway that capitalizes on their aptitudes and interests.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, to echo what Justin says at Maumee, it's my counselors that I trust for things like this. I mean, all this has to go into EMIS, right? I mean, there's a lot of accountability factors. I understand that maybe other states have coaches, but we're not awash in money. And there's nobody who I would trust more than my counselors.
Yeah, and you know, that's you kind of touched on something that I was going to say, Matthew, is that, you know, I think that school counselors kind of end up being the person to manage this because they're the closest tied to all of it. You know, you end up being the people that you know enough to manage all different parts of this and are connected as best as possible throughout the school and the school district. I think, you know, an idea of a career and college readiness, you know, coach that would be incredible. And if Ohio, you know, could have something like that. I know some school districts that have the opportunity do implement a position similar to that, but, you know, like you said, Matthew, you know, not every district has, you know, resources to be able to do that. So school counselors end up being the ones. Justin, I heard you talk a lot about tools. And, you know, often, you know, in the offering of tools and the offering of resources, you know, statewide, that's where the department can come in to help. So if you have ideas about things that would be helpful from a state perspective, or if anybody else that's listening here has ideas, feel free to include those on the agenda. You know, we're more than happy to hear your ideas, and, you know, you are the people we are working to serve, you and the students that you serve on a day-to-day basis. So if you have ideas about resources, I would love to hear that, and I'm sure everybody else from the department would love to hear that as well.
Great, thanks.
All right, I'm going to switch us to gallery view so we can all be in the same room. Cool. All right, I don't have any more questions. Willa Marie, what about you?
I do not. I'm checking everything out, and I think we are good to go.
Okay, this has been so informative. I hope everyone bookmarks this. I hope they share it with their principals, their, you know, counselors, and everyone that they know. This is really great information. And Graham, correct me if I'm wrong, but next meetup, we are going to be talking about the military enlistment option.
Yep. So main focus is going to be on the military enlistment seal. I think we're also going to try to loop in some other topics there as well that are relevant. And maybe, you know, closing the loop on the intentionality of a graduation plan too. As we go from, you know, talking about graduation plans at the beginning of this series before we went into College Credit Plus, I'd love to close it out with that idea as well. So, you know, and anything else that needs to be covered as we go into the end of the school year at this point.
Right. This year has been a marathon, and we are seeing that finish line, and we are coming. It's been a great year, and we've been doing these meetups since Michelle. This was Michelle's idea when we shut down in March 13th, Friday the 13th. We were like, we got to be able to reach out to our counselors and provide resources. And then this is definitely something that we have carried over, and I could see us continually carrying over, because right from home, we can hop on and everyone can hop on, and with YouTube, you can keep watching it. So good job, Michelle. This was her idea. So
Yeah, but you just took it to another level. So it's a team effort.
yeah. So thank you for everyone for coming today. And does anyone have any last minute things they wanted to put out there before I close this out?
Thank you. That's all. Thank you to everybody that joined us today. Really appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge.
Okay. There's a bit of a delay before we end. So